So today we're at the battlefield of Vimero. That was a really important battle fought by Sir Arthur Wellesley, aka the Duke of Wellington, on the 21st of August 1808. It saw British soldiers and their Portuguese allies take on the might of the French army in Portugal.
The small British expeditionary force is confident after their victory at the Battle of Holisa.
Hep, hep! Hooray! Hep, hep!
But now they've got an even tougher task. Wellesley has to face General Junot. He's aggressive and confident. His soldiers have won battles all over Europe, and they've proven to be virtually invincible. Can Sir Arthur Wellesley and his thin line of redcoats finally change history and start beating those incredible Frenchmen? Wellesley had skillfully placed his men along three key features. On the hill in front of Vimero village were Fane's and Anstruther's brigades.
So Junot's columns come round and they're on this position, and the British send out their skirmishers, and they're able to use these lines of vines and hedges to their advantage. And we've got a good mix of 5th, 60th, the Royal American Rifles, and the 95th Rifles, and they managed to fight.
Dream team.
The dream team. It's what you want on your side. Baker Rifles, the British Infantry Pattern Rifles, and they fight off nearly all of the French skirmishers. So it means that the columns are advancing without their swarm of voltigeurs out there, and so therefore they can snipe in, start taking out leaders, NCOs, officers, and the massive fire here, including from howitzers and shrapnel shells upon the columns, just intensifies upon the French, causing heavy casualties.
And Marcus, am I right in thinking this was the first time shrapnel shells had ever been used, or is that a bit of a myth?
It's a really commonly said misconception. You'll see it in a lot of sources, and even I myself have been guilty of saying it, but rightly so, it is wrong. It's been proven that there were many cases of shrapnels being fired earlier, but what it still is that a secret weapon that the French do not have. It's a spherical ball that is the right thickness, that's basically filled with more musket balls, and is firing those out across the heads of the enemy into a cone of death as it comes down upon them. The French only have spherical shot and solid shot, and spherical shot means it breaks apart and you've got this big piece of metal, but if you don't have the musket balls inside, it's just not hitting as many people. It's death by mathematics.
Can you give us a sense, where were the French coming from and what was their goal here?
The French were coming along the valley, using the forward slopes of the far side, bit of an oblique angle, coming up these slopes here, which were actually covered in vines and hedges at the time, so it would have been slowing them down. And they've also got to cover this slightly damp, swampy ground where all the reed beds are down at the bottom. And their goal was to smash into the British main body of troops, which were down there towards what's now the Memorial and Museum. And their goal was quite simple, to smash through the British lines and head towards Lisbon and send the British back to the sea and back to Blighty, which they expected to be over in one morning.
The two-deep line of redcoats stood prepared. As they opened fire, the French column was ripped apart by the volley.
They did love columns, didn't they?
They love columns, and it's the first time that we see that. They always talked about at Waterloo, they came on the same old style. Well, this is the first time that these troops are going to experience those French columns. And French columns are pretty scary, a dense mass of troops, lots of drums, lots of banging and chanting, and they're coming.
I've watched Sharp.
You've watched Sharp, they rat-a-tat-tat, yeah. And they're coming in. Only the front rank can fire, but behind them, all of their mates pushing them in. And that élan, that French spirit of battle, is going to be driving up bayonets right into your face.
They're coming on in the same old style.
So we'll have to meet them in the same old style.
It seems a bit of a strange mathematical problem that you've got line versus column. You can fire more with the line, but this really suits the French style of warfare that's come out of the Revolution.
Mass armies, conscript,
that
a
is
battering ram.
And battering, and they can slam in. And if troops break, they'll go right amongst them.
Soon they were sent reeling back down the hill by an aggressive, perfectly timed bayonet charge. The second French column also suffered badly. General Charlot's men raked with fire and sent reeling. Junot's first attack had failed miserably.
So Vimero, or Vimeiro, is a real site of historical significance for the Portuguese. All around the town are this sort of, I guess you would say it's a type of monument commemorating the part that their soldiers played in this important battle. It's really nice to see. Even the street names are wonderfully designed. Look at that image.
But while the attack up the slope outside the village was being broken, General Kellerman had managed to lead 2 battalions of grenadiers around Fane's left flank and into the village of Vimero itself.
Yes, so General Kellerman, who's the younger son of a famous French General Kellerman of cavalry fame, he's in command of battalions of grenadiers, and what they've done is they've taken one of the French companies and amalgamated them together. That's the Grenadier Company.
Were these seen as like an elite unit?
Yes, they're seen as being the taller, the braver, the stronger, a bit like the British have the Light Company and the Grenadier Company. And they form them all together into 2 battalions of grenadiers. And he sees the fighting stalling on the first attack on the slopes where we just were, and sweeps right into the town and comes along these streets. And they're repulsed by regiments like the 43rd Light Infantry, who fire over these walls, leaning over them, and it's a bit of rubble, a bit of fighting, and it's point blank bayonets just in front of their face, over the wall, and blasting them in. And there's a lot of fighting both ways, but eventually the French grenadiers are repulsed back out of the town.
At this point, with the French battered and falling back, Colonel Taylor led his 20th Light Dragoons into a charge.
And they head on down this slope and they're charging towards the French in retreat. What they haven't realised is what you can see today is all these reeds lead to swampy grounds and their horses start to get stuck in the mud. The French see that and are on them. You can imagine the horses' hooves getting squelching and suction into that mud, and they can't manoeuvre, and the French are in on them. They then can't manoeuvre their guard up with their 1796 pattern sabres, and the Light Dragoons are cut down. And even today, locals telling me that this is still known as the water or the pond of the blood, that little river and swamp down there. Loose translation, but it's still known by that because so many men were cut down in their saddles into that area, and they had to turn tail and ride back into town in defeat.
So what did that mean for the outcome of the battle? Did it look like that was going to cost the British severely, or was it not that important in the grand scheme of things?
They still had their line, so the British were probably still okay. What it did mean is that afterwards, if there was going to be a pursuit, they'd lost the majority of their cavalry. We see it time and time again in the peninsula. Wellesley gets his victory, but he doesn't get to exploit it afterwards and win the campaign.
Because the cavalry are
galloping at everything. It's a glorious charge, but it doesn't go well.
Yeah. So Junot tried to attack one more time, didn't he? What happened?
So he tries back the same way, just slightly further down the valley. And as he pushes in, there's a counter push from the British lines, and one of that sides is led by the 71st Highlanders. And they push out and are firing upon the flanks of the French columns as they're coming in, because they're obviously quite box-like, a long rectangle. And if you get onto the side, again, you've got the supremacy of fire. And as they're doing so, one of their pipers, one of their young musicians, is shot, wounded, he thinks mortally, and he props himself up on a rock and he continues to play on, and that's young Piper Clark of the 71st Highlanders. And it's really nice. There's a memorial, they've got this mural with an additional pipe coming off the top. Clark did survive, and he was presented with a set of silver bagpipes by the Royal Highland Society in Edinburgh after the war as well for his part. And there's some really good artwork commemorating that fighting Highlander spirit here in Portugal.
And so the French were sent reeling back the way they'd come. Sir Arthur Wellesley and his Redcoats and those green-jacketed riflemen, as well as the Portuguese, had done the unthinkable. They'd beaten the Invincibles.
So was this really a make or break battle? If the British and Portuguese had lost here, was that the campaign over?
They probably would have lost face diplomatically, and also the casualties they might have been suffered in the pursuit afterwards would have caused it. They didn't really have much to their flanks. Their troops are still offloading out to sea, and their next commander is still on his ship. So it could have just broken it in one go.
This information panel says in August of 1808, Sir Arthur Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, set up his headquarters in this house in Vimero.
After the battles, we had Generals Burrard and Dalrymple take over command from Wellesley, actually in the evening straight after. And they met here with the French, and they signed a ceasefire, and they signed it within this building, and they went inside and signed that document. That document 9 days later would be signed to become the Convention of Cintra, down in the town of Cintra, which was the worst peace deal that I've heard of in history. We let the French not only go back to France with their arms and their colours, but we even shipped them there in ships of the Royal Navy. All 3 generals were taken back to Britain with to be court-martialed. All 3 were found innocent, exonerated, but only Wellesley was sea command again. And it was in that intervening time that command went over to Sir John Moore, who had the fateful Corunna campaign. But it was in this building, Wellesley's headquarters, that the ceasefire that leads to the Convention of Cintra, right in the town of Vimero, between the church and the hospital, took place.
So as you know, quite a lot of you guys helped to support this trip. You very kindly gave us some money towards fuel and food, and I really appreciate it. And so I wanted to thank some of you here in the video today. So just quickly, I want to say thanks to Jeb, that's J-E-B Jeb, Julian Hall, friend of the show, had a few dealings with him before. Dale from Australia, good to see that our reach and people's interest in British military history spreads across the world, so that's fantastic. And last but not least, a guy I've met personally, really like, he's on my Patreon page, patreon.com/redcoathistory, that's Simon Massey. Simon's a lover of history, so thank you very much, really is appreciated. So Sir Arthur Wellesley now steps out of our story, at least for a short time. In comes Sir John Moore. He advances into Spain and then is forced to retreat to Corunna. That's a story we're not going to be able to tell on this journey. But I have done podcast episodes about it before, so do check out my Napoleonic and Peninsular War playlists, you can find that. But stick with us, because in the next episode, we're visiting the battlefield of Talavera. It's July 1809 and Sir Arthur Wellesley has returned to the peninsula. It's fascinating stuff, and it's also the backdrop to the wonderful Bernard Cornwell novel Sharp's Eagle, one of the best.